Roger Ramsey, the executive chef here at the Hardin County Schools Early College and Career Center. Welcome back to EC3 Really Cooks. Today, we're going to make some baked goods. There's a reason for that. I want to introduce someone to you. Got a new person in my life. Bless her heart, she puts up with me. It's Miss Keisha Pitt. Chef Pitt had just come to us here at EC3, and her background's in baking and pastry. She teaches our Introduction to Culinary Arts. She teaches our Serve Safe course. And this show is all about her because I want to introduce you to her.
Just tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right, I'm Keisha Pitt. I am from Cecilia. As Chef Ramsey said, I do have a background in baking and pastries. I graduated from Augusta Escoffier School of Culinary Arts. I also own my own bakery called the Crummiest Bakery. It's an in-home bakery that I run out of my home. I'm married. My husband actually teaches here as well. He's the automotive teacher, Tom Pitt. We've got 2 kids. That's about me.
Okay. Again, folks, we're going to do some baked goods. We're going to talk about some ingredients you're going to need. Probably have around the house. If not, you might want to go fetch some. What those ingredients do in your baked goods, we'll make a few things. I'm going to put together my favorite bread dough because it only takes about 20 minutes or so. It's a yeast bread. It's a pizza crust, but you can do more with it. We'll talk about that in a minute. Also going to make a little dessert, Mexican dessert called sopapillas. They're not really baked, but we're making them for the same products. We're going to call them baked goods. Then we're going to fry them, like donuts. Miss Keisha, what are you putting together for us?
We're going to make some biscuits, and then we're going to make some bagels.
Fat Boy's Dream. Now, folks, you notice when I introduced Chef Pitt, I said her background's in baking and pastry. Mine's culinary arts. Well, you'd think they're both in the kitchen and the same thing. No, they're not. Okay. In my world, we make mostly savory foods. I dabble with baking. She's really good at it. Culinary is referred to as arts. Baking and pastry is a science. There's actually chemical reactions and stuff going on. Measurements much more precise. Recipes really need to be stuck to because of those chemical involvements. But we're going to get along. I know a little bit about this. She knows much more about cooking than I do baking, but we're going to get through this. We're going to talk about some of the ingredients we use in the bake shop. Okay, first and foremost, flour. There are several different kinds of flour. There's all-purpose flour. There's whole wheat flour. There's rye flour. There's bread flour. The difference between all-purpose and bread flour and pastry flour is the amount of protein in it. Protein is called glutenase. When you mix glutenase with water, stir it, agitate it, it turns into gluten. Gluten makes bonds that hold things together. So your loaf of bread, having gluten's good. Your biscuits having gluten's bad. That's why they make different protein strengths of flours, and the amount that you agitate or mix it has to do with it. So, but first and foremost in the bake shop, we're going to use flour. That is the structure for whatever we're putting together. Think of it as it's a muscle mass of a piece of steak. Without it, you just don't have much. Second most commonly used ingredient in the bake shop is going to be eggs, of all things. Eggs do a couple different things. They have a chemical in the yolk called lecithin, which acts as a binder. That's handy. The yolk has fat in it. Fat's another component we're going to be talking about here in just a minute. And there's a lot of liquid in there. And liquid's the next ingredient we're going to talk about. So, first and foremost, flour goes in the bake shop. Second ingredient most commonly used are eggs. Talked about the eggs having liquid in them. You have to have some facet of liquid. Generally, it's going to be milk or water, buttermilk, heavy cream, a lot of different ones, but these are probably the 2 standard, the water and the whole milk. Okay. We're going to use some salt in the bake shop. Salt does a few different things. If you're working with yeast, it helps control the activity of the yeast so it doesn't get carried away. I'll show you what that looks like here in just a minute. It also adds flavor, right? So it's a seasoning, just like you put salt on your steak or your vegetables. It makes things taste better. You don't want it to taste salty, but you want it to taste like whatever it is. So we're going to put this a little salt in. Next, we're going to need some sweeteners. Generally, most common, probably plain old white sugar, maybe brown sugar, honey, molasses can be used, cane syrup, any number of sweeteners, artificial sweeteners. Now, you know the sweetener is going to make the product sweet. That makes perfect sense. That's why it's called a sweetened right? It also helps brown up. Think about, burnt sugar is called caramel color. That comes from sugar products, okay? We're going to need some fashion of fat generally. So we've got a couple different ones here. We've got the old standard shortening. We've got butter, which is a wonderful product. And we've got some pan spray, which is canola oil under pressure. But you're going to need some fashion of fat in there. What's fat do for you? Well, it adds a richness to it, to your bake products, obviously. Also helps brown. We were affectionately referred to as pan spray when we're using it in the bake shop to finish a product, yeast rolls or biscuits or whatever, as a spray tan because it reacts with the heat and helps brown up your food. Now, all this isn't going to mean a thing in your baked goods if you don't have some fashion of leavener. Leavener is what causes your product to rise, okay? So we've got a couple to look at right here. This is baking powder. This is baking soda. They're not the same thing. And this is yeast. So let's start with the yeast. Yeast is a natural leavener. It's a single cell organism that when it comes back from dormancy, generally a little water, some type of carbohydrate, sugar, it comes out of dormancy and it consumes those carbohydrates. As with any living organism, when it takes in nutrients, it has to expel waste. Please forgive my crude analogy. When yeast wakes up, it expels waste in two forms. One's ethyl alcohol. That doesn't mean go out and make some hooch, but a byproduct of yeast is ethyl alcohol. What we're worried about in our baked goods, however, is carbon dioxide gas. All right, so that causes the bubbles. And you can see those. That is the yeast proving itself. That's why we have proofed baked goods. So yeast is a leavener. It's natural occurring, and it has to be brought out of dormancy, fed, and then it will cause some leavening in your baked products. Other than that, we have baking powder and baking soda. Baking soda by itself won't do anything. If you're going to use baking soda, you're probably going to have some kind of acid to add with it. Buttermilk, lemon juice, cream of tartar, some type of acid because this is an alkaline. Baking powder already has the acid and alkaline combined. Now, when you mix acid and alkaline together, chemistry stuff, it wants to come back to neutral. And in doing so, it releases carbon dioxide gas. So it's going to do, this will do kind of the same thing as this in the end run, but they're not the same. Yeast makes yeast spreads and baked goods. Baking powder or baking soda with an acid make quick breads. The textures are different, the tastes are different, and it depends on what you work with. Okay. What we don't have here is called mechanical leavener. It's mechanical leavener, think something like a croissant or a pastry dough, and it's layered, it's laminated, dough and fat, dough and butter generally. And when that butter melts, the water in it gives off steam that causes a lift. That's mechanical. We're not doing that today. That's a lot of work. Not that I'm beyond doing some work. I like doing work. I like getting my hands dirty, playing in the kitchen. But we don't have time for it today. So we're going to clean some of this stuff up out of the way. We're going to come back. Miss Keisha's going to make her couple of baked goods. I'm going to make y'all a couple of baked goods. And I think we're going to have a pretty good time. So let us clean this mess up. We'll be right back. Okay, folks. I'm going to put together quick and easy pizza crust. Two of my favorite things, quick and easy. Okay, just a handful of ingredients in this. You're going to need probably need a few pieces of equipment if you're going to be doing some things in a home bake shop. If you're going to do it often, get yourself a good stand mixer. This is KitchenAid, but they're not paying me anything. I don't care what brand you get. This is a KitchenAid. And it comes with a few attachments. This is a dough hook. That's what we're going to use today. And it mimics the action of kneading bread dough. This is a whisk. We don't need this one. This is for incorporating air into a product. Think making meringue from egg whites or whipped cream. We don't need that one today. And for general mixing purposes, you'll need a paddle. Making some brownies, some cookies, wonderful. We're not making brownies or cookies today. We're making bread. So in our bowl, we have 2 cups of flour. I know that because I measured it. You'll need measuring cups. In that 2 cups of flour. We have, grab a recipe. We have a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Measuring cups, measuring spoons, salt, right? Told you we'd use it. It's in there. I know because I put it there. And you go give it a little mix. Now, however your mixer goes together, put it together. I made mention about when you bring yeast out of dormancy, it expels waste. I made mention about proving yeast and its gas content. And this is what it looks like if you leave it set just a few minutes too long. Yeah, that's all foam. So what's in there is nothing more than a 2/3 of a cup of water, measuring spoons. We need a tablespoon of yeast. And we need something to feed the yeast to bring it out of dormancy, which is plain old white sugar. Now, there are a couple different kinds of yeast. If you have NC yeast, this step's not necessary. NC yeast goes right into the mix and does perfectly fine. We have active dry yeast. It's a better plan to go ahead and prove it, wake it up, get it foamy before you use active dry yeast. There's also cake yeast, which only kind of pretty much professional bake shops use. And then it comes in literally a big block that's measured off, and it's alive when they get it. So we're going to take our foamy yeast, because we can, and put it into our flour. Now, shortly this one will look like that one. That's just the way it works. And give it a mix. Slow down. There we go. Now, maybe I lift the bowl up just so that the dough hook gets all the way to the bottom of the bowl. That's all. It's a matter of kneading with the machine 5, 6, 7 minutes, or by hand for probably 10, 12, 15. And it's not much fun to stand back and watch. So, I'm going to put this to the side. We'll give Chef Pitt up here. She's going to put together a little something for you. Then we'll revisit.
All right, so we are going to make some bagels. We're going to use very similar ingredients that Chef Ramsay used. We've got 6 cups of flour in our mixing bowl. We've got a 1.5 tablespoons of brown sugar, so that's going to be our sweetener. We have a tablespoon of salt, and then we also have a tablespoon of yeast. Now, I'm not going to bloom my yeast like Chef Ramsay did. I'm going to put it all together because my bagels are going to have to rest. So, I'm going to load. I'm going to load my bowl here. We're going to use our dough hook. Now, if you don't have a hand mixer, that's not a huge deal breaker. You can knead it by hand, but it'll take probably about 10 minutes because this is going to be a stiff dough. I am going to put all of my dry ingredients in and kind of take my dough hook and kind of mix them around. So I've got 2 cups of lukewarm water. That way it will activate our yeast. I'm going to go ahead and turn my mixer on. Low. Well, maybe. There it goes. And I'm just going to slowly add in the water. And I don't want my water to be too hot because if my water's too hot, it will kill my yeast. So it won't do anything for my yeast if my water's too hot. So I'm actually going to turn it up a little bit so it'll need a little more. So this is actually going to take about 7 minutes. And once it all comes together, it will go into a greased bowl. So So I'm going to grease this bowl, and I'm going to cover it, and then it's going to rest for about an hour before we divide it and shape them and then let them rest again. All right, now we're getting to the pickup stage. So it's picked up all of our dough from the side of our bowl. It's a little tacky still, so we're getting there. We're almost there. So while we're kneading our dough, we're actually developing gluten. So that's the agent that binds our dough together. And some doughs you don't want to work too much because then you develop too much gluten. And then it makes it real chewy or tough. But bagels are a dense dough, so kneading them for this long isn't an issue. Lost some spray here. So while this finishes up, I'm going to slide that right there. So when you go to coat your bowl, you can just use cooking spray. Just a light coat will do. That way it's all covered. All right, so a way to test and see if your dough is ready is to pull a gluten window. So you get a small piece of dough, you smash it down like this, smash it down with your fingers, and then you pull it. And it will pull super thin and barely tear. And that's how you know you've developed enough gluten. So I'm going to run it for just another second to get that dough back. Mixed back together. It's a little easier once you take your dough out. Kind of shape it a little bit before you put it in. And then you put it in your bowl, and we're going to let it rest for about an hour. It'll get a little bigger, not necessarily double in size, but it'll get a little bigger. And then we'll take it out, we'll shape it up, and then we'll let it rest again, and then we'll get started making our bagels.
Okay, folks, I'm back with my little pizza crust. Now, all I did was put it on that mixer, let the mixer, the hook working for however long Chef Bill was talking to y'all. And this is kind of what it looks like right here. Now, what you need to do is let it proof for a minute. And to do that, the easiest way to do it, take your little mixing bowl, just a touch of oil in the bottom, coat your dough ball with oil, and it says to cover it. Let it rest. Let it double in size. Well, actually, this is going to double. We'll give it about 15 minutes or so. But here's a little trick I learned a long time ago. If you're covering something you don't want to film a skin on it, like our dough ball, instead of covering your bowl up, lay your plastic across the bowl and push it all the way down so that it makes contact with it. Works with bread dough, works with custards, anything that you don't want to get a skin on the top of it. And we're going to let that proof for about 15 minutes or so. Are you proofing oven? Would you put that in there for me, please? Thank you. While that's happening, I'm going to put together another little dish called sopapillas. Now, sopapillas are a baked good. They're fried. Think of something along the line like a beignet, a donut, something like that. Difference is, this is a quick bread. What's that mean? It means we're using chemical leaveners instead of the yeast. So, give me just a minute. I've got my flour out. I need to grab my, what do I need? Baking powder, a little sugar, salt, honey, milk. Got to grab just a couple things. I'll be right back. All right. Sorry about that, folks. I've gathered everything. Now, what's in the bowl? It's just 2 cups of flour. I know that because I put it there. We've got a tablespoon of baking powder. Baking powder, not baking soda. Remember, baking powder is both acid and alkaline. Baking soda is not. It's simply alkaline. So, what else we need in there? We need a little sugar. 1 tablespoon. Sugar. What else goes in there? 2 teaspoons of salt. Yeah. Now, some folks will say, Chef, that's a tablespoon. You only needed 2 teaspoons. I know. I'd fill it up. I didn't. A tablespoon's 3 teaspoons. So 2 teaspoons fits well inside of a tablespoon. You just stop at the right spot. Trust me, I'm a professional. We got salt in there. And we'll give her a little mix. You can use a whisk for this, but why? You got your fingers. They're clean. I washed them. Now, let's see. We've got all our dry ingredients in there together. Pour it into honey and the whole milk. How much honey do we need? We need a tablespoon of honey. Trick to this is, if you measure honey, to coat your measuring spoon with oil. I didn't bring it all the time. And we need 3/4 cup of milk. So, now, I said we need to stick to our recipes in the bake shop. With that said, there's a caveat. Flour's a finicky beast. It will draw moisture out of the air. Some days it'll take a little more liquid, some days a little less. Just kind of have to get used to the feel for it. So we're going to start with exactly what the recipe said. 2 cups of flour, all the dry goods, and 3/4 cup of milk. See if it'll come together. And it is shaggy. That's what we want. Now we're going to mix it with our hands. Yes, my hands are clean. I washed them before we started. I washed them before I started working on the pizza dough. Pizza dough is the same stuff this is. There's no contamination issue there. So, we need to work this till it comes together, which it pretty much has. Maybe just a touch more flour. Remember, it's a finicky beast. If it's still sticking to your fingers, the biscuit dough, touch flour. Now, with that said, from like a bread dough, the pizza dough you just saw, I like it a little sticky. Just the finished texture is better. For biscuits, the sopapilla is still a biscuit. It's fried, sweetened. You kind of want it to come fairly clean. And I ain't gonna lie, I kind of like that. So what I'm gonna do, let this rest. Again, it's good food, it's not fast food. Resting it allows a couple of other things to happen. Number one, the gluten we built up into it. We talked about gluten at the beginning of the show. Lets it relax. It lets the flour hydrate, suck in the moisture we put into it. For us, that was the milk and the honey. And you gotta do it. You just gotta. That's the way it is. So we're going to let this rest for a few minutes. I think Chef Pitt has something else she wants to put together. Then we're going to come back and revisit everything.
All right, so now we're going to make biscuits. I mean, who doesn't like a biscuit? Put some gravy on it, put some eggs, some honey, or just a biscuit. All right, so we're going to take our flour and we're going to add our tablespoon of baking powder. I know that because I measured it earlier. Then we're going to take our teaspoon of salt and our tablespoon of sugar. We're going to put all those in there. Then we're going to take our whisk. We're going to whisk it together. So that's just to get all of our ingredients incorporated together. So that way we don't miss any chunks. Don't want anything hanging out, not mixed well together. You can also use a sifter. A sifter will do the same thing. If you don't want to use a whisk. So either one will work. All right, so then you're going to take your butter. This recipe calls for 6 tablespoons of butter. And you're going to cut it in. So you can take a knife and you can cut it into small pieces. I'm going to take a cheese grater. And I'm just going to take our 6 tablespoons of butter here. And I'm just going to grate it in. So when you do this, you take our fat and you make it into smaller pieces. So that way when it gets incorporated into all of our flour, when they are baked, it will leave air pockets. So our butter will melt and the butter will absorb into our flour and leave air pockets, but it will also leave behind all of that butter. I'm also using unsalted butter. because I've already added salt. So usually when you bake, you use unsalted butter. We use unsalted butter so that way we can control how much salt goes into it. I don't know if you've ever noticed that most baking recipes call for unsalted butter, and that's why. Alright, then I'm going to take my pastry blender. Now if you don't have a pastry blender, you can use a fork, you can use 2 butter knives, those work well. You can also use your hands. So you want to cut your fat into your flour until it kind of resembles cornmeal. So this gets all of our fats mixed in and into smaller pieces into our butter. We want our butter cold so that way it holds up and holds our shape better. So you want to work your butter until it's about the size of a pea. And then it gets this consistency. Kind of flaky, because you want to make flaky biscuits. So we get this consistency. Alright, so we've got all of our wets and our fat in there. So now we need something to hold it all together. So we need milk. Actually, we need buttermilk. We don't have any buttermilk. So what do? So I have a substitute. So for every cup of milk, if you add a tablespoon of some sort of acid, typically vinegar will do. You can also use lemon juice. And let it set 3 or 4 minutes, it will actually make buttermilk. Or a buttermilk substitute. So that's what I did. So I added half a tablespoon, since it's not quite a cup. So I made our own buttermilk. So we'll add that in. And then we're going to stir it all together using what is called the biscuit method. So that's when you take all of your dry ingredients. So that was our flour, our salt, our baking powder, and our sugar. Then we added our fat, our butter, and then we added our liquid. It could be eggs and milk. Just kind of depends on what you're doing. Then you're going to mix it all together. And this one might actually need a little more milk. So you can always add more, but you can't take away. So I'm going to start with a half a cup. I'm going to grab my vinegar to make my buttermilk. I'm going to let that set for just a second. So while that's setting, there's something else you're going to need. So, you need a biscuit cutter. Now, if you don't have a biscuit cutter, that's not a huge deal. You can use a glass, a cookie cutter, whatever you fancy, really. But I'm going to use a biscuit cutter. So you need a biscuit cutter, and then you'll need a rolling pin. There are all kinds of rolling pins. So we have this kind of rolling pin. This is your traditional rolling pin with the handles, kind of like you're riding a bicycle. We have these rolling pins that have the different stoppers on the end that tell you the depth for when you're rolling things out, because that's important. And then we have my personal favorite, the French rolling pin. So if you notice, it has no handles on the side. So with no handles on the side, like this one, you're not inclined to push down when you roll out. So if you've ever been making cookies, biscuits, or anything, and they get flat in the middle, that's typically because when you roll it out, and you're using a rolling pin like this, you're pushing down because you're using this as a handlebar instead of a rolling pin. Well, with the French rolling pin, I figured out that you're not inclined to push down because you don't have anything to hold on to. I learned that from teaching my daughter to bake. She was rolling something out and she was doing that. So I used this already, so we tried it and it worked. So We actually just got some of these for the kids to use, and it seemed to help. So, if you're in the market for a new rolling pin, try a French one. All right, so back to our biscuits. So, I added just a little bit of liquid to see if that'll get our biscuits to come together. So you always start with a little. Now, if my biscuits were too sticky and too tacky, I would add just a little bit of flour. But there's still a whole lot of flour on the bottom here, so they're not going to want to come together. There we go. Now we're getting somewhere. Because you want your biscuits to form a dough, so that way you can roll them out. And if they're still a little sticky, after you've added a little bit of milk, it won't be a huge deal, because it'll actually pick up a little bit of your flour when you're rolling them out. So you make sure your spatula's clean or whatever you used. All right. So this next part is crucial, because if not, your biscuits will stick. So our recipe calls for our biscuits to be 1 inch thick. So I got our little ruler here that has all kinds of information on it, but this is 1 inch. So we'll roll them out and we'll check them just to make sure they're the right size. So when you get ready to roll out biscuits, you have to make sure your surface is floured. If not, they're going to stick. So you flour the bottom, you'll flour the top, that way your rolling pin doesn't stick. And whatever you're using as a cutter, you'll flour that too, because if not, it'll stick whenever you go to cut them. So, lightly flour. Now that my hands have flour on them, the dough isn't sticking to my hands. I always add a little flour on top, and then kind of shape them into a ball. Alright, a little flour over here for my cutter. Alright, so you're just going to roll them out. Now to get an even roll, it's good to take your dough and turn them. You can also do that technique when you're making a pie crust. That way you get an even shape. Now as we roll, you can see all that butter that we incorporated is hanging out in our dough. So let's see how thick we got. Oh, that's actually about a half an inch. So our recipe says for 1 inch. We'll go with a half an inch, because 1 inch will probably make biscuits about that big. So we're going to make these about a half an inch. Now this biscuit cutter has a hole in the middle, so you can get your biscuits to release. When you cut your biscuits, you want to cut them as close to the edge and as together, so you can get as many biscuits as you can. When you cut down, you just give your cutter a little turn. That way it cuts all the way through. Then you take your dough that you've got left. You work it back together. Not a whole lot, so you make your biscuits tough, just enough. Dough stuck there just a little. Add a little more flour. So you want to make sure your biscuits are uniform in how thick they are. That way when you bake them, they all bake at the same rate. Because if they're not, if they're thinner or thicker than each other, then they won't. So I'm going to get as many biscuits as I can out of this dough. Thank you, sir. So this recipe yields for 6 biscuits, and I think I'm going to be able to get 7 out. So I've taken my sheet that Chef Ramsay grabbed and lined it full of parchment paper. You're going to take your biscuits and line them up so they touch. That way when they rise, they'll be nice and uniform. Sometimes you got to maneuver them just a hair. All right, and that's all the dough we've got left. So I think that would be a successful biscuit. So we'll be right back. I'm going to throw these in the oven. We'll get them cooked and browned, and we'll check them out after they're finished.
All right, folks. I've got my pizza dough here. It's proofed. We let it set however long it took something to do what she was doing. I don't know. I got engrossed. I was watching. I was digging it. So, plastic off. No skin. That's a good thing. So, if you want to make a pizza, get your pizza pan, press it out, sauce it, dress it, bake it. I don't want pizza. We're going to do something different. Still a bread, Roman bread. It's called focaccia. So, what we're going to do, we're going to take a little sheet pan, this is a quarter pan, add some olive oil. Now, often I'll tell my kids the recipe will call for olive oil just because it's an end thing. Olive oil is expensive. Oftentimes it's not serving a purpose to pay that extra money. Often you can get about using plain old vegetable, canola, or corn oil. However, for focaccia, olive oil is actually a flavor component of the bread, so do use your olive oil. If you have good olive oil, all the better. If you have cheap olive oil, it's still better no olive oil. So, we're going to smear it, that's the technical term, smear, across our quarter sheet pan. It's pretty heavy. It's going to be soaked up by the bread. Take our bread dough, dump it in the middle. Now, what we got to do is press it out. Fingerprints, you want those dimples. There's a reason for that. Get to it just a bit. Stretch it. See how it's pulling itself back? That's the gluten in it. That's just the nature. So we've got it pretty much filling up the pan. And we've got dimples. They're important. Now, a little more olive oil. It's going to hold in those dimples. We want that to happen because it's a flavor of the bread. Now we need to season it. What are we going to do that with? A little salt. Because salt makes everything taste better. Now we can flavor it. For me, just a little fresh herbs. Just a little bit of rosemary. A little perfume. Now, folks want garlic bread? I don't blame you. It's pretty tasty. Don't put fresh garlic on top of this. Because we're going to bake it at 450 degrees for about 12 or 15 minutes. Your garlic will burn. So if you want garlic bread, do what I've done so far. Sans the garlic. Bake about halfway through, then add your garlic to it. Better than that, instead of using olive oil, use some garlic oil. Make your own. Olive oil and garlic together. Cook it down. Good to go. Okay, so this will go in the oven. I will put it right in there with Chef Pitt's biscuits. Should be about 450 degrees, 12, 15 minutes, and we're good to go. We're at 425 because that's where the biscuits are. They're a little more tender than is my bread. So, we'll just let it ride a few minutes longer. Till we give it just a minute to wash the salt off and oil off my hands. I'm going to roll out some sopapillas. I'm going to get those in fried while Chef Pitt's finishing up her bagel. So give me just 1 minute. Okay. I've got my sopapilla dough together. Remember, all that is flour, baking powder, a little sugar, a little salt, some milk, and honey. Now, what we need to do is roll these out. First, we need a little bench flour. Now, when you're working on a tabletop, bench flour, you don't need to put gobs of flour out. Just enough to keep your food from sticking. Easy peasy. Then need a rolling pin. I have one. Here's a little trick about rolling doughs. Always start from the center and work your way out and give it a little turn. Center and out, give it a turn. What that'll do is keep your food from sticking, and it kind of keeps the shape that you're working with. Starts to get a little tacky, a little more flour is fine. Need to roll it over. Roll it up on your rolling pin, a little more bench flour. So that is somewhere in about the area of 1/4 of an inch, I do believe. Now we got a neat little toy for professional kitchens. It's got a caliper. It's adjustable like an accordion. All it does is keep your cuts fairly parallel. Don't have a caliper? Pizza cutter works real well too. So we've got our sopapilla dough cut into something sort of like a square. Chef's bit. Now these, that are nice squares, we're going to serve those to our friends and family and our paying customers. The ones that are rounded, chewed up, a little ratty looking, those are for us. It tastes just like the square ones, just doesn't look as pretty. Now, again, these aren't baked. Yeah, we're doing baked goods today. These aren't baked, these are actually fried. Donuts are fried, it's okay, we can fry them. Beignets are fried. The little Italian pastry that the name eludes me now are fried. And these are just like all those, except these are quick breads instead of yeast breads. Still took a few minutes. It's not fast food, it's just good food. So I'm going to start dropping these in the fryer. Chef Pitt will be back in just a minute. I'll clean up this mess. And she's going to finish up those bagels. What if she brought any cream cheese? Well, smoked fish would be good too.
All right, our biscuits are out and they look delicious. But every good biscuit is better with a little butter. So I melted a little butter. We're going to brush that on top. And then we'll cut one of these guys open. So, since our biscuits were all the same size and all the same thickness, they all baked at the same time and all have a good uniform color. Except for this guy over here. I don't know what he was thinking. He's a little bigger than the rest of them. Now, if you wanted a sweeter biscuit, you could add a little sugar to the top. A little cinnamon sugar. Put some honey in the middle. A little strawberry preserves. All that good stuff. All right. Let's cut one of these open and see how they look. Still a little hot from the oven. Slide that over here. All right. There we go. We got nice flaky layers. Good crumb. Looks like a good biscuit to me. All right, so our biscuits are done. Our bagels have proofed, so now it's time to shape some bagels. So I'm gonna get our biscuits out of the way and go grab our bagels, and I'll show you guys how to shape some bagels. All right, so our bagel dough has nearly doubled in size. So I'm gonna push it and let some of the air out. That way we got a good dough form here. And then gonna work it out a little bit. And then just gonna drop it right here on our work surface. So our recipe says it will make 10 bagels. I'm gonna use my trusty bench scraper that any baker uses for anything. Use it to clean the table. I use it when I fill my piping bags to scrape all of my fillings to the very end. separate dough, pretty much anything. These actually have measuring marks on it. That way, if you're measuring something, you can just do it with your bench scraper. But for today, it's just going to cut our dough. So I need 10 sections of dough equally. Typically, you would measure it, but today we're just going to kind of eyeball it. So I cut it in half, and then I'm going to divide each half into 5. Separate them. Alright, so now I've got my 5 sections. So I'm going to work it a little bit. Make sure we got all the air out, because a bagel is a tight shape. So it's a tight circle. So this dough isn't really sticky, so I don't need to flour my surface. But I need to get all the air out, because if not, our bagel will have air pockets. So I'm going to work it around, tuck the bottoms in. That way our top is flat. Then I'm going to kind of round it out with my hand. So that way our bottom is tucked. Pinch it in a little bit. And then round the top out. So then you have kind of like a filled donut. So bagels have a hole. So then I'm just going to take 2 fingers, my thumb and actually my middle finger, and then I'm actually going to work a hole in the middle of the bagel. So I'm going to stretch it out. Now, if you wanted to make a bigger bagel, you wouldn't cut them into 10 pieces. Then I'm just going to set it over here, let it rest. Then after I get the rest of them made, they're going to have to go back in and proof again. I'm going to put ours over in the oven to proof. They're not going to double in size, they're just going to get puffy. So they're going to kind of get fluffy like a marshmallow. Then after they get that way, there's one more step before we bake them. Who knew there were so many steps to making a bagel? So another type of pastry that gets fluffy like a marshmallow is a croissant. So after you've laminated your croissant and you're ready to let it rest, a croissant is shaped and it sits out and it rests, and then a croissant sits out and then it too puffs up and it gets very fluffy and pillowy, a lot like a marshmallow. That's actually how I was described in pastry school to know that it was ready to bake. That it would feel like a marshmallow. Just the lightest touch. Alright, we got 2 left. So after I get these 2 finished, I'm going to cover them. I'm going to put them back in. Show you how I do that? Alright, so I'm working it to get all the air out. Kneading it a little. And then I'm folding all the sides in.
Can I do it this way?
Yeah. So that creates the bottom. Then I turn it over. That creates your smooth edges.
Your smooth edges.
And then you just take the middle. Poke a hole in the middle. And work it out. And that's it.
Yours looks much better than mine.
Then we'll proof them, and then give them a bath. So,
You can fix that if you want to.
nope. We're going to leave that one. That's Chef Ramsay's bagel. So, I'm going to cover these and put them back in the oven to proof, and then we'll be back in a little while to give them a bath, and then bake them off. Alright, we are back, and our bagels have proofed. So, like I said earlier, they will be kind of fluffy and pillowy. So, we have achieved that. Alright, so now I have to fix our water bath. So we are going to take our bagels and we are going to soak them in a water bath for about a minute and a half on each side. So before I do that, I'm going to add our 4 teaspoons of baking soda and 4 tablespoons of brown sugar. So we're going to soak them in a water bath to start the cooking on the outside of the crust. And we use baking soda and brown sugar because that will help enrich the flavor and give them a good crust whenever we go to bake them. You also do the same thing with pretzels, if you didn't know that. But you don't put them in the water bath near as long as you do with bagels. So, alright, you want to make sure that all of your baking soda and your brown sugar has melted. You can also use maple syrup if you didn't have brown sugar. But we had brown sugar, so I just used brown sugar. Another substitute, in the event that you needed brown sugar and you didn't have any brown sugar, but you happen to have maple syrup and white sugar. Brown sugar is just white sugar mixed with maple syrup. So you just add however much maple syrup you need to make whether light brown sugar or dark brown sugar. You just mix it up, and that's all it is. So, all right, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to take our bagels. As you can see, they're very pillowy on the bottom. And I'm just going to drop it lightly into our water bath. Now, of course, I'm using a larger pot so I can hold more in here. We're going to leave them in here for about a minute. This might actually hold all of ours. But you don't want to overcrowd. So we're going to leave them in here for about a minute. And then we're actually going to flip them. And then we'll put them back in the oven and we'll bake them off. So while those guys are hanging out, I'm going to take our egg. I'm going to make our egg wash. Because this will actually go on top of our bagel. If my egg will crack here. That way our eggs will have a nice golden crust. And if you want to put any toppings on top of your bagel, your egg wash will stick to them better that way. So, there's just a tablespoon of water in here and an egg. Some egg washes call for milk. This one just calls for water. So, you just want to mix it up real good. Then we'll brush it on with our pastry brush. Gonna pull these guys out of here. Alright, so to dip our bagels, I just made some cinnamon sugar. I didn't measure anything. I just put some sugar, sprinkled some cinnamon, so whatever consistency you want. Alright, so I'm gonna take my soaked bagel, dip it in my egg wash. So my section that's been in my egg wash is going to go right into my cinnamon sugar. It will be slippery. So now it looks like this. And you're going to put that side up. You're going to take these and put them in the oven at 450 for about 15 minutes until they're golden brown and baked. The edges will be good and crispy and baked on the outside, and then we'll be good to go. So we'll be back in just a few minutes.
And 3, 2, 1. Well, folks, we've done a couple things today. We made some baked goods, and you met Chef Pitt. We'll make more baked goods, and you're going to see more of Chef Pitt. It's going to work out nicely. So what do we got? We've got Chef Pitt's biscuits. We turn them into a little strawberry shortcake. This strawberry sauce we had lying about, a little whipped cream, some strawberries, lovely. Focaccia bread, start out a pizza crust. Let it prove a little longer and a little thicker. It's just a Roman flatbread before pizza started. We've got some lovely bagels, little cream cheese to go with. No fish. No fish. And we've got our not quite beignets, sopapillas, quick bread. Traditionally, there's some little powdered sugar, some honey and butter. So this bowl, nothing more, so hot honey we melt a little butter into. But if you happen to have a little caramel sauce just laying around not doing much, it's gooder than good too.
You didn't make your caramel sauce?
Shh. Smuckers did. So, folks, we appreciate y'all spending time with us. Keep us in mind if you have any catering needs. It's just EC3.cater, the Hardin.kyschools.us. That's a mouthful. Give us a call. It's a whole bunch easier. We appreciate your time. We'll get back together soon. What are we going to do next time?
I don't know. We'll think of something.
We'll do something. So, anyway, appreciate y'all's time. Thanks for visiting with us. Somebody's got to eat all this. I'm doing keto. Jeremy, looks like it's on you, my friend. So, thank you very much, folks.